believe he is. He's a legend. Legend in the world of the pro wrestling.
So it's going to take more than this to hurt his feelings.
That guy don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
He's a legend. But when I was a kid in high school, he's old as fuck. Yeah. He's well, those guys, that's a hard way to make a living, man.
Oh, he died
at age 79.
He had a good run.
Yeah. That's a good run for those guys. That's a fucking hard way to make a living. But
Have we ever talked about the idea of Neanderthals as like having a confrontational hunting style?
No, I don't think we have.
Because when anthropologists look at the skeletal remains of Neanderthals, they see this sort of suite of this pattern of injuries on them. And a researcher was looking at the types of fractures that they have on their bones and where the fractures occurred and the breaks and like cracks in their skulls. He was looking at all this and wound up working with a doctor who had a lot of exposure to rodeo riders, bull riders. And the doctor was observing the way in which that suite of injuries was very familiar to him from rodeo riders, the types of breaks and the location of breaks. And this guy has this idea that they had a very confrontational hunting style, that they were like mixing it up with big animals. And another thing they found is that when you're looking at skeletal remains from early people, you still see that separation in the sexes, right? That the males would suffer injuries with a greater prevalence than females. But with the Neanderthals, it seems like they didn't have the sort of like duplicity of roles.
So maybe
the females have the same prevalence of these types of injuries.
Whoa. And
so maybe they didn't have that, they didn't share that division of labor.
Were the females as large as the males?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
So we know that they had stone tools, right? The crude stone tools.
Yeah.
But we don't know whether or not they had anything that could launch them. Like they didn't have. Do we know if they had spears?
I don't believe that they've found they had atlatls,
right?
And I don't know if they were hafting materials, but they were doing art. And I think there's a little bit of a debate about whether they were doing representational art, but they were doing art. They were probably making jewelry, and these are all things that as we kind of like wake up to what these people were really like, and it paints like a more complicated picture. There's even this theory, and I don't know if this held any water or how long it was fashionable for, but you had this really long history of, this extremely long history of hundreds of thousands of years of Neanderthal, occupation in Europe. And then it seemed to be that, I remember someone putting forth this idea that it seemed to be that there was this flourishing of advancement that was contemporaneous with the arrival of our own ancestors in Europe, as though they were being exposed to or seeing art and seeing jewelry and mimicking this from these new invaders that were coming in. But I don't know where that idea sits right now. I don't know if it's been dispelled because of other discoveries. But I remember thinking that was an interesting idea that they would, and it kind of paints this really sad picture, right? That they would be sort of in the autumn, of their existence. And here's these adorned people showing up with these amazing toolkits and all these abilities and kind of struggling to sort of catch up. It'd be like the country bumpkin, going to the big city. And
yeah. Well, there was also this idea, I think, up until very recently, that Neanderthals were not as violent as humans, as Homo sapiens. But now there was an article that was published just a couple of days ago that new evidence shows that Neanderthals, like inter-Neanderthal violence between each other, was just as bad as Homo sapiens.
Yeah, and
find that.
And evidence of cannibalism.
Oh, yeah, there was a lot of that, right? Scraping of inside the skulls, indicative of tools. Oh, ad blocker got busted. They get us every time with the fucking ad blocker. Yeah. What does it say? Humans are just as violent as Neanderthals.
Are you familiar with the writer John Mooallem?
No.
You'd like his stuff.
Yeah.
He wrote a really beautiful piece about Neanderthals not long ago.
Okay, I fucked it up. What they're saying is that modern humans were just as prone to violence as Neanderthals.
I don't have a problem with that.
I think I'm conflating this with something else that I read about interspecies violence, Neanderthal on Neanderthal violence. The other thing that's weird about them is they had bigger brains than us. They had bigger brains, and they would be like 5'7" and weigh 200 pounds, just jacked, just a little gorilla thing, you know?
It'd be great to see it.
There was a really dumb theory that was being bounced around a few years ago. It was really hilarious about how we wiped out. We assumed that Neanderthals, because we don't have any soft tissue samples, we assumed that Neanderthals looked similar to humans. But because of the very different shape of their skull, this guy had, instead of giving them European-looking white skin, turned them into a gorilla. Turned them into a giant muscle-bound gorilla that preyed on people. And this was like, I believe this guy was actually was a professor. And it seemed almost like a goof at first. Do you remember this, Jamie? We pulled this up a few times. Like killer Neanderthal theory, I think you call it. But
yeah.
He had drawn this thing black like a gorilla with like giant muscles all over the place and these big crazy eyes, and that painting Neanderthals as a predator of humans, and that's why we wiped them out.
Yeah, yeah. My limitations as I was gonna say my limitations as an anthropologist, but I'm certainly not an anthropologist at all. I'm just a dude who's interested in it. But one of my limitations is I'll hear theories floated, okay? And I don't follow them long enough to see which ones have any traction.
Right.
I'll just read about them, and I don't take it as gospel, but I'll read about it, and I'll be like, that's interesting, and it'll sort of like shape my understanding of it, but then I don't keep track of it. Like, I try to really follow the story of like the peopling of the Americas. So when it comes to the human history of the Western Hemisphere, I sort of follow, and like ideas will get floated, and I'll track the idea to see where it lands in terms of scholarly consensus. But on other stuff, like with Neanderthals, I'm always a sucker for a Neanderthal story, but I don't track what ideas that float up are just very quickly denounced as being complete rubbish.
Yeah, it's a weird one.
You know, it takes time to time to follow this stuff.
Go to that other picture. That's what it is. Them and us. Yeah, but look at some of his images. Look at that image that he has on the cover of the book. Like, those are the idea. But there's some way better ones. There's some way better images what they drew of full body ones. They had. Is it in the article?
This was a link to the actual website from a different article.
Just go to that and then go to images, because there was some really bizarre fucking. Yeah, there it is, upper left-hand corner. This is what this guy.
Yeah, well, that thing, whatever he's got going on, that thing is not making art.
You don't think so?
No, he's making meat, man.